Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. I hope you're doing good and well. So it's time for me to count down my top 10 fantasy films of all time. Now this list wasn't necessarily difficult to come up with, but it was really difficult to decide on the order I put these films in, because a lot of these films have a really special place in my heart and I kind of enjoy them all equally. Some of these films wouldn't necessarily be the critics' choice. I mean, I think some would, but some certainly wouldn't, because they have their imperfections. But for me, because of the personal context of me seeing a lot of these films when I was very young, I'm just very close to them, and they have a charm. You know, all these films have a certain charm to them, whatever you think of them. And something I will say that I will defend about pretty much every single one of these movies is they all have stunning soundtracks. The composers of some of these soundtracks, I mean, God, there are some absolutely sublime themes and soundtracks in each of these films. So if nothing else, if you don't watch the films for the films, watch the films for the soundtracks, because I know a lot of you guys are music fans out there that watch the channel. The soundtracks of these fantasy films are all pretty amazing. And actually, maybe a lot of you know these films anyway, so you may be able to relate and you may be able to know what I'm talking about here. But maybe it's something to do with the fantasy genre. A lot of fantasy films do have really good soundtracks. So anyway, moving away from soundtracks and onto my top 10 countdown of my top 10 fantasy films of all time without any further wasting of time. My number 10 is Dragonheart from 1996, directed by Rob Cohen, a film which starts off, it's a prince who is wounded in battle, and he has to have his heart part replaced by a dragon heart in order to live, and in order to basically become king, to be king of this kingdom he has inherited from his father. Turns out, though, that he ends up very much at odds with his former mentor, who is portrayed by Dennis Quaid in this film, Bowen. And you also have voicing the dragon in this film, none other than the legendary late Sean Connery, who is brilliant just as a voice and a presence almost in this movie. So yes, this is one of those films that I mentioned at the start that certainly wouldn't be the critics' choice. At least I don't think this would be the critics' choice, but it has tons of charm. And you'd have to have the coldest, blackest heart not to be moved by the final scene in this film. I'm not going to say exactly what happens, so I don't spoil it. When that music kicks in and when you know, if you've seen the film, what happens at the end of this film, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And, you know, is one of the reasons this film is my number 10, because it moves me. I saw this film when I was 11 with my mum at the cinema, and I can't remember if I cried my eyes out, but I'm pretty sure it would have moved me. And, you know, maybe I've repressed the memory of it because I'm so embarrassed. But I think this film just has lots of charm. And like I say, many of you out there might think this is a rubbish film. And, you know, it has problems, but it has so much warmth. And it's that last scene that gets me every time. Dragonheart from 1996 is my number 10. My number 9 is Labyrinth, one I suspect you have all heard of, or surely many of you have heard of this one, from 1986, starring a young Jennifer Connelly. Also has the late, great David Bowie in this movie as the Goblin King. It's about a girl that has to rescue her baby brother after she's wished him away, basically, and unintentionally somewhat, as the baby is now held captive by this Goblin King, and she has to negotiate a labyrinth to find him and to rescue him. The thing about this film is, again, it's a film with imperfections. You know, it's a bit cheesy, it's pretty campy, but here we go again. It's the practical effects in this film, I think, that are wonderful. The puppeteering, the Jim Henson who directs this film, the puppeteering is just incredible. If you know the amount of work that went into this film, it's absolutely staggering how they did this. You know, so many people who mock old films and just don't understand and just say, oh, that film's outdated, but they don't understand the effort and how good the practical effects and the amount of work that went into those practical effects was, because you live in an age now of CGI. But honestly, if you understand the effort that went into Labyrinth, I think you can appreciate it on a whole other level. The set designs are also stunning. The way the Labyrinth looks, to me, maybe it's just me, but I think the Labyrinth also looks absolutely amazing. The Labyrinth is, I don't think it's underappreciated. I think this film does get a lot of appreciation. It's a bit of a cult classic and everything for people that know Labyrinth. It's my number 9. I love Labyrinth still, and I probably always will love Labyrinth. Next up at number 8, we have a very dark film, dark fantasy film, very dramatic. It's about a little boy who is facing the death of his mother. Maybe you know this one. It's a pretty recent film from 2017, called A Monster Calls. Has Liam Neeson voicing the tree in this film, and also stars the likes of Sigourney Weaver and Felicity Jones, some big names in this one as well. So Monster Calls is a charming film that very delicately and sensitively balances the darker side of it, the dramatic side, with the fantasy elements, and does so very well and so very precisely, that it's hard not to feel another lot of emotion with this movie. And if you think Dragonheart's emotional, then, well, you maybe need to see just how moving A Monster Calls is. This film will probably be more of a critic's choice for one of the best fantasy films of all time. I think it has quite a high rating on things like IMDb. It's a well-rated film, and it is just absolutely beautiful. I maybe would say, if you've had a recent loss, or if you're facing this kind of a situation in real life like the little boy is, then maybe best not to watch this film. But then again, maybe it will help. I don't know. It's such a deeply moving film, and I would say not an easy one to watch. Maybe if you watch this, then watch Labyrinth, or a lighter film like the next one I'm going to mention afterwards, because it may just take off the deeply sad elements or after effect that A Monster Calls has. That's my number 8, A Monster Calls. My number 7 is a lighter, very entertaining movie called Willow. A quite famous movie, this one. This was directed by Ron Howard, and it's one of those films I just want to shout out the soundtrack to this film by James Horner, which is just brilliant. The main theme is beautiful. I can remember getting the DVD and I wouldn't get past the DVD menu because I just wanted to let that gorgeous theme repeat over and over again. But anyway, Willow is about a film it's a film about a character called Willow Ufgood, who has to go on a perilous journey to save this baby from an evil queen. Personally, for me, the performance I love most in this film is the performance of Val Kilmer as Mad Martigan, who embodies this clownish yet tough warrior-like man, and does it so well. It's probably my favourite Val Kilmer portrayal of anyone in a film. It's just so fantastic to watch him and the two sides of him, and also the chemistry, the on-screen chemistry with Joanne Whalley in this movie is also something to behold. It's amazing. They both went on to marry as well, I believe, and they are no longer married. But anyway, that's a side note really to this film, which was I think it's a great entertaining film. Again, maybe not aged that great in certain parts of the movie, but it is what it is. And I love Willow. I can watch it easily. It's a good one to watch kind of between the period of Christmas and New Year, I find. Because it's just light, but it's kind of nice and easy to watch, and fills up a bit of time, and like I say, has that absolutely stunning soundtrack to this one. So that's my number 7, Willow. Number 6 is a film I go back so very far with. This is possibly one of the first films I ever watched. This is from 1981. This is Clash of the Titans. It is an old film with the Ray Harryhausen models and stop motion animation effects. I love this film so much, and it's another film which has some issues. I think occasionally the acting's not that great, but then again, the cast in this film, oh my god, you've got Laurence Olivier, you've got Maggie Smith, you've got Ursula Andress, it's just so many big names, and it's an epic fantasy film. Here's the thing, right, even though the film looks a bit dated, it fits the Greek mythology thing so well. I don't know what it is. It's like a spiritual thing with this movie and me. Because it looks dated, it just works with the Greek mythology, the ancient stuff, and it just all fits together and blends together so well. I really love this film. It's kind of cheesy and old, but there's something about it. I've watched it since I was, 5 years old. Loosely based on the Greek myth of Perseus. Again, the soundtrack of this film is unbelievably good, by Lawrence Rosenthal, another soundtrack you need to check out if you're a music fan or a fan of classical music. The soundtrack to this is oh my god, it's off the charts. My number 6 is Clash of the Titans from 1981. Apologies if I get carried away sometimes in these kind of things, but you know, these are films that I go back so far with. It's hard not even to feel a bit of emotion when I'm talking about some of these, because they're just so good. So next up on my number 5 on my list is Pan's Labyrinth. This was directed by Guillermo del Toro. It's a Spanish movie, and it's another quite dark fantasy film, a bit of a period piece, and it sort of has the same sort of tone as A Monster Calls because it's quite serious, but it has some lighter moments, and I think the fantasy brings those rather like it does with A Monster Calls, and it definitely balances the fantasy aspect with the really kind of dark stepfather. The stepfather in this is a megalomaniac, he's horrible. But the little girl, Ophelia, is fantastic, and her performance is unbelievably good, and this film is absolutely charming, and it's also I think it would be a critic's choice, this one, must admit. But it's a film that, you know, I've seen not that many times, but it's one that, again, I find very affecting and extremely good. Pan's Labyrinth is a fantastic film. That's my number 5. My number 4 is the most expensive Japanese anime film of all time, as I've read. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. It's another quite recent film from 2013, if you regard 2013 as recent, like I do. And it's a wonderfully imaginative story about this miniature girl who's discovered in this bamboo shoot, and the parents, to this couple, adopt her. And she encounters all these challenges as she goes through her life, as do some of the people around her as well, in sort of, you know, she's different, she's unique, and there's a special backstory to her as well, which you kind of get to know more, as I recall, as the film goes on. Not a film I've seen recently, so I may make mistakes as I try to describe this one, but I just know this is one of my all-time favourite films, certainly one of my favourite all-time animes. I don't know it's a super high number of Japanese anime films, but this is one of my favourites. And because it fits, I think, quite nicely into fantasy, I decided to include it as one of my all-time favourite films. This film is just especially good. With so many I love the animation, love the characters, love the way the story's told. It's close to perfection, this movie, for me. That's why it's so high at my number 4. My number 3 is the very famous Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the one with Gene Wilder in, from 1971. This film and I, again, go incredibly far back to my childhood, to my very early years. And for me, there's no one else that is Willy Wonka. No one can be Willy Wonka for me. Personally, I get it right. Some of you will probably love Johnny Depp and his portrayal and all that, and Timothée Chalamet. But for me, Willy Wonka will always be Gene Wilder. His performance is exemplary in this film. It just fits his eccentricities, his style, and everything really well, I think. And again, a pretty emotional ending to this film. Again, another superb soundtrack to this film from the early 70s. I love the characters in the movie. I think, you know, the film is sort of a little bit of a horror movie. Hear me out here, hear me out. There's some really disturbing things that happen to the kids in the movie, I think, and yes, some of them deserve it. I've always felt like, in defence of Augustus Gloop, yeah, he may have been being a little bit greedy, going for chocolate, or, you know, a bit overzealous, going to eat that chocolate in the river, but did he deserve that humiliation of being sucked up into a tube in that way, almost drowned and everything? It just, you know, this film plays out like the way the kids are picked off one by one in the way they are. It plays out like a bit of a horror film. But what a magnificent film this is. I will defend this film for a long time. It's just a great movie. Whatever imperfections this one has as well, and I've heard of some difficulties, you know, challenges with it being made and everything behind the scenes, but it's such a fantastic movie, whatever you think of all that kind of thing. So next up as my number 2, this is where we get a bit more predictable with my list, if it isn't already a bit predictable. I hope it's not been too predictable, but my number 2 is Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I don't even need to really explain myself here. Hopefully most of you, I suspect, have seen the Lord of the Rings movies. They're incredible, and they're perhaps the best fantasy adaptation we've ever seen. Maybe in my lifetime, it's the best fantasy adaptation I've ever seen, personally. Yes, Peter Jackson has his, you know, his quirks with the way he likes to make all his films super long. But for this film, I'd rather have someone that cared about making the Lord of the Rings movies really long, or that cared about the movies and adapting them really carefully, than someone that doesn't care at all and that just rips apart the source material and does their own thing, which has been done in some cases recently. Not going to say any names, but you know, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is such a superb film from start to finish. I think it does the book pretty good justice. I read the book before I saw this film. I was only 16 when I saw the film, but I was 14 when I read The Fellowship of the Ring. And I loved it. And it brought to my imagination, the film was as per my imagination from when I read the book. And to achieve that is also something incredible. So many scenes made me think of the way I had imagined them, like the Weathertop scene, for instance. I thought, God, that's how I imagined it in the book. And it looks like it. It's incredible. If you don't like The Fellowship of the Ring, you know, I'm sorry, but no, you can't not like The Fellowship of the Ring. You can't not like this film. Which moves me on to my number one, and again, predictably, this is another film from that trilogy. I couldn't have at least these two films in this top 10. And my top film of all time is The Return of the King. So this is my number one, Return of the King, from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, why not Two Towers? I bet lots of you love Two Towers as well. So The Two Towers for me is kind of like a journey of a film. I mean, I suppose you could say that about all three, couldn't you, really? But there's something about it which, I don't know, you've got Helm's Deep, one of the best battles ever, right? But I don't know, for some reason that one, I just don't quite like it just as much. It's a personal preference thing. I can't even objectively say what it is, right? But The Return of the King, just for me, ends the trilogy on such a high. It brings so many emotions. It does all the battles really well. And who will ever forget the sequence with Eowyn facing down the Witch King of Angmar, and just how incredible that scene is. It's as good as the scene for me with Darth Vader and the Emperor in Return of the Jedi in that scene. It's just so exciting, so tense, and so wonderful. So that's it. That's my number one fantasy film of all time, which you may have guessed if you saw my top 10 films of all time this time last year, because that was one of my top choices as well. Thank you so much, guys, for watching, as always. Really appreciate it. Do drop a like and a sub. Pushing the channel towards 500 if I can. 500 subs at the moment, so do join me in that endeavour. Otherwise, thanks so much. Until next time, take care, everybody, and bye for now.